And I think we're live. All right. How's it going?
Yeah, finally.
Well, without trying to overplay how dramatic it was setting up this, because the technology was pretty against us meeting. Philip is back. Philipp Druzhinin, everybody. How you doing?
I just came home from practice, pretty much tired, but I still have some charge to talk.
Yeah, I mean, I know you've been doing a lot of work. It's crazy. I've seen like you've been doing chats all the time and like all kinds of new research. What's some of the stuff that's been like? I know you've been walking around and seeing some things. What are some things that you've been pretty excited about recently?
Yeah, I was finishing with Polytechnical Museum, that famous one with the red brick that got excavated, and so kind of walked around the surrounding areas and so pictured and filmed the same underground facilities, the same type of what they have. So it's pretty much proves that it's not just the basement floor; it's really a buried and bricked up windows. So it's like very nice for officials to hear this problem, and so they opened up this complex for the people, and they were gonna have some like little coliseum there with the benches, so people probably gonna be sitting around there, talking, maybe hanging around and watching this evidence actually.
Yeah, man, it's so crazy. I've been seeing so much of the same stuff, like even in San Francisco. Though I feel like your job's still a lot harder because we have these like historical buildings that are kind of they're saying, oh yeah, this is an old building, so it kind of sticks out. We can get a map and look for them a little bit easier in places like San Francisco. So it's pretty funny when you pull across a place and they're just like, get out of here. What are you doing here? It's like really, really insane. But we're starting to get that too. I've been doing like, we try to turn a conspiracy into a brand. We got like t-shirts now. If you guys are into like recent Tartarians and Star Forts.
Oh,
And we made like, well, it's something to do. Plus, we also got like a group together. Like all of that goes directly towards this website, like the Tartary website. So all of that is just people can get videos and they can get pieces and they can make their own videos. And it's all open source and you have your free account. It's like pretty sweet. But we met some people through there from all over the world, from like Taiwan, from the Netherlands, people that are studying everything, and some people that are just like in San Francisco. Like this one dude, we went around like all of the different parts of the remnants of the military bases, the islands, the cathedrals. We went through like the Scottish Rite Temple, like the Masonic temple, and the right behind is like this Lutheran kids school and a Shriners. Like kids like fix their voice, speech impediment like for kids, class. And then there's like the giant raised above ground water and power building, which has just been recently repainted. And it has all these like old Babylonian figurines and faces. And there's like statues of lions in the hands of giants, like San Francisco is a trip, and it's right in your face. So like very clear though, right? The Assyrians have not had a country in a long time. So they maintain their legacy through impacting the world's culture to this day, and it's pretty insane. But
yeah. Are they talking about the buried ships?
yeah, there's all kinds of stuff about there in the Oakland specifically though. There's more
No,
than
I
ever.
mean, central part of San Francisco is completely constructed on the ships that were
Yeah.
buried.
Yeah, so the way it works, from what we understand, is like the dunes. We went first to the beach dunes, and where you stand on the dunes, there's plenty of pieces of brick. There's plenty of pieces of rock, and it looks like what there were stone and concrete ships, brick ships, giant ones that were shattered, and it's way larger than anyone's actually anticipated. And the pieces are everywhere. And then when you go to like like Golden Gate Park, right? Golden Gate Park used to just be dunes. It was just sand dunes, but not sand dunes. It was bricks that were shattered. So it looks like shattered. It's literally the remnants of shattered buildings, and we can pick up pieces of these bricks. And I have photos of them that we'll put up soon.
I
But
wonder,
they're in the sand dunes.
yeah, I wonder if you're gonna find any pieces with the labels,
Right.
because
That's the thing that we've been looking into also. And the thing is, it looks like there's a lot of them, not just in San Francisco, but along the coast. Even here, 100 miles or so, 160 kilometers south, There's concrete boats that have turned over that have just been, out in the harbor that they said were decoration from World War II, but they're clearly, there's more to it than that. And we're starting to turn up in the sand turrets, giant like ribbon turrets and things like that, which again they say, like maybe they're from some World War II thing, but they don't fit any, they don't fit, they don't fit the story, don't fit the narrative. It's pretty funny. And then also what we have been seeing is reuse of things. So they take the bricks and then they put them, San Francisco, we should just go in soon to talk to some of these architects about recycled bricks, because they're all about recycling bricks. I mean, you go to these $50 million mansions that Dianne Feinstein has guards with guns in front of, basically, and they're all made of old bricks, but they've been taken out of shattered buildings and put back together. So I feel like we've learned more than we've ever have about bricks now in the last week or two, because we see the difference between how they fit together in, in their origin versus when they get reused. You can see the difference. But especially common is the first floor now will be replaced, and then they'll have the building raised above it. So the first floor will be, a mall, a tank, vault, gun barracks looking black, cube. And then above it will be this old Tartarian building, or, they have very Masonic, solemn, like Sumerian obelisks and,
Yeah, symbolism. It's a huge trend right now in Russia. People get those old bricks with these labels, and they sell them like for huge price. And those bricks are still, valid to be used in construction. And people really buy those bricks and decorate, and it's really fancy, So I'm glad to see that you guys can find some also, because red brick is how do they explain all this production of red brick? What does actual amount of this production? And the amount of construction is also very interesting, because it's glass, it's a roof which is metal mostly, and bricks itself, it's just a huge amount of materials that they're supposed to be carrying out. So it's roads, it's economy, it's hiring people and stuff like this. So it's like a lot of stuff to explain, actually.
It's an interesting line of questioning to look into how these giant, vehicles of masonry were constructed, and then also the time it would have taken to bake in ovens all of these bricks, because the quartz that's involved with this too. We've been just looking into the Indian building of bricks, and there's a lot of, we've probably forgotten more, or they've forgotten more than we'll ever learn about how brick making was done in history. There's so many different ways to make sure that it has the right amount of lime, or that has a certain amount of calcium, or the quartz is broken up properly so that it holds together during the right seasons. The way brick building was done for a long time. It also has this lay stone. There's always a lay stone, It's weird to look into it now, because I think a lot of people are getting beyond just speculative. They're like, literally, how did you build the buildings? And there's certain things where you just can't. Like, one thing we're looking is in Essex, in Britain, right in the corner, I think, is the Angel building, the Angel Palace. And it's a great example of a lifted building where they've just picked them up and then they've started doing this remodel. All around Russia, I guess, you have the same thing with the remodeling. Do you have, everywhere we go, all these buildings are under construction.
Yeah, they just make parkings in those buried floors, and like 2 or 3 floors underneath are just parkings, and that's how they reconstructed. They just take all the inside, leave the outer walls, and that's it. So this is how they do it, and make huge office buildings inside. So it's like, they enlarge them because the land is very expensive. But the problem is not just building this stuff and explaining how to make bricks, in a simple way. Because look at the YouTube, they got so many videos of how to make bricks, simple and easy, like in your yard, in your garden. It's easy to do it. But the problem is that the bricks should be, safe for 200 years and more.
Right. Yeah,
That's
there's
the
something
biggest
about
problem.
harmonic resonance. There's got to be a resonance thing that's holding this thing together. That when that goes, it shatters. It's like a sound thing, perhaps, that we're looking at. There's a couple
Yeah.
of things about kymatics, and that's also one of the interesting things about why I'm curious, especially what's going on with in Russia, where they're were you the first one of the first videos I saw of you, I was like, who is this guy? You were like sneaking around a building and people were like, get out of here, and they're like trying to get you out. You're like, yeah, they've got, look at this, obvious up. It was like, I mean, like, you can't in America, it's like they're just now getting that point. When I first saw that, I thought that was surprising, but now I understand. I mean, they're burning down buildings, right, and they're reconstructing them, and everywhere we go, they've got facades over buildings to cover them so that we can't see what's going on. That's pretty new. That wasn't like that recently. And I had a friend who was just in, I think it was, I can't remember which country actually now, but he was somewhere in like Malaysia, and they've taken the spot off of UNESCO World Heritage because they've restored it, right? And this is interesting because a lot of people don't want to be on a World Heritage site. So all you have to do is restore it. So if you do it right, you just disappear off of a map of World Heritage sites. And there's a lot of spots like that. And so it looks like all of a sudden we're going to be just like Russia, where it's going to be Easter eggs everywhere.
Yeah, the problem is that it's all expensive property, so it's all the price and the economic purpose. Like if they have this efficient way to sell this stuff, they're gonna sell it, unless we're gonna film it and keep it for the future generations, because what we are filming now is could be destroyed in a couple of years, you know, and nobody's gonna save this archive for us. It's only up to us to film it or not.
Yeah, I think someone was saying the revolution will be uploaded and it'll be zucked and then it'll be deleted, but it'll be re-uploaded over and over again and remixed, and it'll be all right for a while, and then it'll be forgotten again. There'll be a new revolution. I
Yeah.
saw recently, like, not just everyone's talking about Notre Dame, but there's so many Our Ladies, right? Notre Dame is like every church is one of them. So those factories that they're reclaiming because they're going to see no one can use them for 20 years, right?
Have you found that
buildings.
what was before the Notre Dame at this place? Have you found this information?
I've heard a little bit about before the gargoyles that it was a harmonic resonance building that was used for the ley lines for energy. I've heard a few theories. What's yours?
Yeah, we have this information. Well, it's not yet confirmed. So I like last chat I was trying to already say something about it, but I should keep it for a couple more weeks because it's not yet confirmed. So the information is that Vatican itself is established on the place where the Jupiter temple was. So it's like official narrative. Vatican was in Rome, right?
Mhm.
But we see this information that it was really established only in the 19th century when they actually bought this land from the government of Italy. So it's like they had no property there until 19th century. Although we know they are like for 2,000 years already there. Like it's not a big surprise for us to. It's like that Mandela effect. We know that they're for very long there, but then actually not that long. And on some maps we even don't see them. So it's like, and the problem is that had the Jupiter temple there, and also Notre Dame was also Jupiter temple.
Mhm.
This is actually why it is one of the most important Catholic cathedrals, because they both were Jupiter. And what do we have right now in Vatican? We have St. Peter's Cathedral. So if you take Jew out of Jupiter, you get Peter. So
Mhm.
that's where the Peter came out.
Ute.
And
Yeah.
and we also have this Peter in St. Petersburg, because we call it also Peter, not after the Peter the First, but we call it Peter because it's St. Petersburg. And so Peter is also stone,
Right. Rock
right?
Mountain.
Rock, stone. So it's like all St. Petersburg made of different granite and all this stuff. So it's like very hard to explain with the official paradigm of the technology that they had. they made so advanced constructions there that we cannot even explain. So my point is that Jupiter was probably the one of the leading gods, and that's why we have all these antique style sculptures everywhere. At the same time that they supposed to have very rough Christianity era, right? Where people were just burned for refusing to say something from the Bible, like a simple word or something like this. They were burned for this. And look where we have the evidence is like everybody was building pagan style stuff and nobody cared. It's just out of line. But if we think about it as it was created only in 19th century, it makes sense because all those buildings that we have seen in our photographs and sessions look exactly the same antique style, and all those pictures are made in 19th century. That's where they found it, and what they're doing right now is like they destroying the evidence step by step because they cannot just clean all these buildings immediately because they need them obviously to for for using them, because they captured the buildings, they captured all the property, and that's why they're using it. Like sometimes for a museum, sometimes they use it for collecting the money from tourists and stuff like this. So it's like it's economic purpose of this is very important for them, and they use it. But step by step, they reconstructed, and erase the evidence. Like they had the people with the naked bodies, and now they have them with the clothes. And very soon we're gonna see like different noses, different faces, changing, and Gargolia's there. Look around.
Right. Well, a couple of things. I think I'm glad that you're willing to say that stuff as a hypothesis so far, because that's exactly what we've been looking at in a lot of ways too. In first off, the philosopher's stone, and so the idea of Peter Behedra, the stone, and the philosopher's stone mountain, the alchemical rituals that they use to make little wood by making stone into metal through flesh and fire. You got to throw a hand in if you want to make some magic. They have some pretty scary rituals, and it seems like it comes down to you got to die to make a philosopher's stone, or maybe 6 million people do. There's also that in the Full Metal Alchemist. We've been looking into some cartoon things too, because there seems to be like a lot of correlations there with hiding some stuff right in plain sight. But it looks like, yeah, there's something to the idea of the female church inside of a church. Also, you gotta imagine, like, if you're in Russia or you're in America, like, there's certain people that can do more than other people. Like, there's the KGB and the CIA or something are probably it's a little bit disconnected, So there's some people in the church that were being burned at the stake for not just wearing a tie, but there's other people that were allowed to do their polygamous sex goddess worshiping cult that was always there. It was always in Rome, and it goes back further than Rome. Like it's like, so Sophia, the goddess Sophia, is the goddess of wisdom, and she's often associated with Cassandra. Cassandra is like the daughter of Troy who gave the gift of prophecy, but no one like really understood what she was saying, so she could never be, it's like the joke that she could never be understood. But that's the deal. There are some people that are crazy enough that are into that, and they run little circles around everybody else, and that's been a big thing in the ancient world, was the feminine archetype. So earlier you said, what was the thing that led up to that? You were saying the removal of statues.
Dressing them, in fact, different way dressing them. So they
Right.
had different fashion in antique statues. They had more naked people,
Right.
and then they dress them to be like more dressed and look like maybe with beards, different noses, like they had a some knife in the hand, and then now they have like a cross, for example. We have this example on St. Isaac's Cathedral in St. Petersburg, where we see the evidence of something changed in the hand. So hand is not holding the cross before, and now it's like has the cross in his hand. So it's like very, very interesting because they could be editing those statues. through the years while those reconstructions go, you know.
Yeah, and I think there's a big okay, and that was the thing. So the Bacchus cult and feminine worship. So by removing, first off, by hiding the figure, by hiding femininity, by hiding masculinity for a period before the reaction period, which causes a worship of those things, right? A reveling in those things. There's a period of suppression. And so the suppression then makes the other thing more powerful. So you think about also what happens when you make someone a king for a day? You sacrifice them. You know, so you've got people that are thinking that they're worshiping the male form by making the male powerful, but it's just so that they can make the male work harder. And then they're doing the same thing now to women, right? So the thing is to oppress, suppress, and provoke the opposite, and then sacrifice. And so this is leading up towards a overworking of the feminine archetype, because Jupiter, which is represented as like this male, it's the sun, right? It's going to be the sacrificed figure, and so it makes men overworked. But then the female is really Saturn, because people think of Saturn as this father, but Saturn's the one with the belly, right? So there's really like there's and it plays into the whole Dr. Money androgynous thing.
Yeah, I think it's just an inverted explanations. After the defeat of previous civilization, we had everything edited, and therefore we cannot, trust the explanation that they give us about the ancient gods and their purpose and stuff like this. Probably is just, has to be researched and checked one more time with the fresh view, with more like experience that we have already. But I got so many comments from the people that really trying to how do you say, be skeptical about these theories, and so like they try to refer to construction, that it was like we're supposed to know more about construction, like we're supposed to know more advanced information about chemistry, geology, and all this stuff. That's why I'm always trying to invite people into the research. If you
Yeah.
have the degree in some construction or chemistry, just join it, and to show us what is your professional view on what we see, what we observe, because we don't have any explanation. Officials actually trying to debunk us while just mocking us and bullying us. We don't have any dialogue with the officials. Actually, officials trying to make how they build something with the bare hands, but what they just showing us is just ridiculous evidence of their impotence. Like they cannot do anything. Actually, they cannot replica something from the ancient past, and that's the
Um,
problem.
that makes me that reminded me, like you're saying, get people to check it out while they have a second. Is tartarinova.com. We have like, you get all sorts. So there's a free site that we put together that has all the kind of information and connects people. That we have a chat room, and you can like, we found people that do geology and stuff, and so we've also created like a platform that has like a built-in map system, and it has like photo viewer, and everyone can upload as many like star maps. There's all kinds of crazy amounts of information on here now. It's a lot better than the Facebook, because you can download the things directly, and you can have things like that are just for educational purposes, but you can have video files and things you probably wouldn't want to put on YouTube. So this is pretty cool, because we've been making radio chats, which are not really recorded all the time, but like can be, but are designed for the purpose of allowing people to, if you have a question ever, jump in there, and then people will show up with a friend who does geology for a little bit. So you can just pop it in on their phone. But that's, I just want to say, check out the tartarinova.com.
Yeah, that's good that people join this activity, actually. But like some people, what is your hardest question? What questions you think you can't answer? Actually, can you
Man, I
like?
mean, that's the thing. I mean, that's why we keep coming back to you. You keep finding new answers that come with 1,000 new questions. The things that have been blowing my mind recently are steam. I've been wondering a lot about like steam, and what your opinions on the, like, the Soviet, former Soviet nuclear energy companies are making new nuclear power plants where they're going to these former UNESCO sites. So I'm pretty curious what you think about energy all the time, you know, and I know you're always
Yeah,
evolving on that.
just if we fall back to the official information, we can find blueprints and pictures of turbines like gas turbines, steam turbines. They were like constructed and invented in the end of 18th centuries, just before the 19th century, and actually implemented in the production into the uh, actual factories and stuff like this in 19th century. So it's not a new technology at all. What we have on the jet planes is the same turbine. So it's like, people wake up. It's all same old stuff, just good forgotten old stuff. They take it out of the box and use it as long as they need it, as long as we have economical efficiency. All these
Did,
levitating devices, all this stuff was already invented.
did
All
you
all
have did you have any hearing about that the thing though about like turbines causing induction into the ground and killing cows? Have you heard about that? Do you think it's real or what do you think that's about?
Well, I'm not really into the physics of each and every device, what they can actually do, but I'm just, I'm researching it from the historical narrative. Was it possible or was it not? So we probably know that turbine is some energy device. It creates energy that could be used. So that could possibly explain everything that we like doubt about. So how could they have illumination? How could they have gas? That I found out they were mining gas and using gas in illumination of the streets. So they were like, picking whatever the resource they have. If they had this resource, they used that resource. If they had no resources, they probably use some atmospheric and plasma resources, which are, more not as efficient as gas, because gas is like very free. You can just, drill a well and you can use it like for 100 years or even more. So it's like more efficient than just, use all those spare parts for atmospheric electricity and electricity at all, because it's more expensive. But everybody knows it. That's why all the Europe, all the Russia and America is heating up with gas. So I mean, they used the technology that was more efficient and more ecological. Gas is the most ecological fuel that we have right now on Earth.
Yeah, I really believe that. It's something you pointed out, and at first I kind of thought, "Wait a second," but then I realized I've just been greenwashed in California because it really is true. You can break the energy into a confined space in a much safer way, and you can have explosions that you can control. And you look at this idea now that we're looking at, if you have so many turbines, there's a lot of energy going to the ground, or if you have a lot of mirrors focusing light, you're making the Archimedes death ray. And so maybe these technologies that we thought of as green right now, back then were the reasons we have, Tartarian disasters, Atlantis disasters, different kinds of we think of natural disasters, but we've always been hearing about 5G or like the ley lines of energy. And right now we're doing all these things thinking, oh, well, it's going to be greener, but it's like, what are the consequences going to be? And it's like, yeah, oil might be, at least, natural gas might be in some ways safer, but then you have to control how much you can use and how much you can
Yeah,
not.
oil is definitely not as good as gas, but I think it's a byproduct of undersea mining, first of all, because a lot of oil is being pumped out of, or maybe not undersea, maybe even underground mining. We don't know, because maybe they are still mining
Mm-hmm.
underground. So, like like Richard says, he believes in some boiler room underground or whatever. So, well, I can actually also suppose that we have some underground mining and undersea mining, because I saw videos that guys like proving this stuff, actually proving this stuff. So I mean, this is a great idea to research it, because all those guys that have scuba diving suits and all this stuff and live near the sea. I might also be checking the sea coast, the place I go on vacation this year. So maybe dive a little bit and check it out, because everything is in a plain sight. You just have to search it. You know.
Yeah. Also, meeting miners is cool. I met some miners from Australia. I bet you can meet some interesting Russian miners and some Bolivian miners. But the Australian ones, they talk about playing dubstep. Like underground, what they'll do is they'll blast with bass sound vibrations at things to shake the material so that the sediment settles down and lands into a deposit. And then, so you drill to a place that's mud, right? So you need to go to a solid area, shake it up, and then you can extract like amounts of material. So they use really loud dubstep like music too. So I mean, miners are doing some crazy stuff. Like, and it sounds like that's the liquefaction stuff. I was like, really?
Yeah. It's very a lot of mining technologies. I've researched block cave mining, for example. It's like mining metals underground and collapsing all those stuff down and just collecting the pure metal. So it's like very what we have on the surface. You have a sinkhole. That's why we have so many sinkholes right now, because all those ancient block cave minings, you know, were hanging out for 200 years, and now they're just collapsing to
Yeah,
the
or
sinkhole.
maybe like you said, they're still doing it, and then these are
Yeah,
the
maybe they're still
consequences.
doing it.
Yeah.
Maybe we're also doing it, and maybe they're using us to do it. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, they're not using me because I'm too lazy. But yeah, I know some people that would totally be tricked into that. But most people, yeah, you're right, probably have no idea what they're involved in. And I think that's the funniest thing. We have this group now, like the experts, and like 90% of everybody says, "Oh, I'm not an expert. I just happen to know everything about what's going on within." And so as long as you get four people together, they can kind of see what's going on, right?
Yeah, I was driving a taxi, and that guy came, the taxi driver. He was pretty old, like 65 or something, and I just asked him a couple of questions. So he said, like, I was a military man before. I'm like a colonel, ex-colonel, and I do taxi driving because I have money, but I do it just to talk to people. So I said, oh, very nice. So what troops you were in? He said, like, I was a communications officer, like distant communications, and also I was a deputy head of nuclear testing site. I said, what? What side? He said, in Semipalatinsk. I know that town. It's like very huge testing site. It's like it's as big as Austria.
What's it
So it's
called?
like
Semi Palati?
Semipalatinsk. Semipalatinsk. Right now it's in Kazakhstan. It was in the territory of USSR, right in the middle of the country. So where so they had a bunch of testings there. So I was asking him, like, have you seen any nuclear effects on the surface, like people were dying or something from this radiation? Like you had a bunch of soldiers there, so probably somebody would fuck around somewhere and maybe go to the place that you cannot go. He said, like, no, nobody ever died. I said, so did they have any radiation measured on them, like after the sites? He said, no. We had only underground testings. Like they had these on surface testings before he came to job. But have you seen all those nuclear craters? He said, yes, I seen all those old ones from the 60s. But I said,
Wow.
Did you measure radiation there?" He said, no. Somebody even was fishing inside of those craters because water came in and somebody poured some fish in it, and fish, like, it's a lake obviously right now because 50 years passed. So they go fishing there and get this radiation free fish and eat it. So it's like very interesting. So I said, so you believe actually in nuclear? He said, yes, I was testing a bunch of times and we had measurements of underground nuclear uh, explosions. Even the mountains were rising after the explosions. Like mountains were jumping into the
Mhm.
sky and like collapsing totally with a pile of waste. Like, it was a mountain before. They drilled a hole underneath it, placed this nuclear charge, not very big ones, of course, but the mountains were like blowing up and like collapsing totally with no even not a big rock inside. So like total dust and sand. So it's like, I said, how can you prove that it was nuclear? He said, all those measurements that we sent to the central central office of Russian army. So we measured each and everybody. So it's like alpha, beta, radioactive
Right.
elements were captured from it, and so seismic activity was captured. All this stuff was captured. So he's like a total believer.
He's like,
But
dude, get a Geiger counter. Yeah.
yeah, but I shaken his opinion on this after I started talk, and he was like, yeah, you kind of right. Maybe we had to measure it actually with some devices on the test sites, but they were not allowed to go there because they said there's big radiation there.
Mhm.
So I said, why didn't anyone go? How much time did you spend there? He said 15 years. So 15 years, not anyone fuck around, got drunk, and went to this place and got this radiation. Maybe
That's a
only,
sketchy story for Slavs not to do something that dangerous, right? Yeah.
yeah, says he said probably vodka helped them not to feel it.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe. So it's like I
Well,
shake
I
his
think that there
opinion.
could be good for you, right? I don't know. Okay, let me take that back. What I've heard of people that believe in radiation, absence of like lack of radiation being a problem in health, and using iodine and radiation being supplemental. So it could be that people that have radiation are better off in certain doses of certain kinds of radiation, whatever, because sunlight is pretty good for you. I mean, I like it. And so I wouldn't say that I would want to live completely without sunlight. There might be certain ways that radiation is not bad for you. And then we start removing all kinds of radiation. It's natural. So some people are speculating that there could be some natural benefit to having a normal dose of radiation, especially as the Schumann resonance is increasing. And you've probably seen people in Pripyat that still live there, right? So I
Yeah.
mean, it's not exactly like Chernobyl killed everybody. Like a lot of kids moved right back. I've seen videos of these ardent old Soviets that are digging, gardening cucumbers, and they're big radiated friggin' cucumbers. I mean, they're bigger than normal cucumbers. So obviously radiation's around, and you could get a Geiger counter and you can find it like in the corners of buildings and places that absorb radiation more. But you get in a helicopter and spray mushrooms in a fan, or out of the sky, and then it's going to start eating the radiation the way plants get sunlight. So it's not, I mean, this whole idea of radiation, all it's doing is it's keeping people out of zones. Where's it keeping people out of? The nicest places in the world, Bikini Bottom, Bikini Atoll, like the SpongeBob atomic island, or Chernobyl. Pripyat's one of the cradles of civilization. It's where Seraphin, the Saint Seraphin, started his whole thing. The beginning of wooden churches comes out of Chernobyl. So I mean, it's crazy, like how radiation, all and also Japan supposedly launched right after the war, right after their bomb, they launched a nuclear bomb in Korea. In North Korea, there's a nuclear zone from the test bomb the Japanese were building. And both, Chernobyl and Japan and any place with these atomic, not only are they doing all right, they have like giant lemurs and lynxes and crazy cats and things. Great life is flourishing there. So it's not like what we've been told, at least.
So what I've got after this information, I got thinking that we had some weapons and we have some weapons that are comparable to what we know as nuclear weapons. Like it has really destructive power, so it can blow up the mountains, make some huge craters and lakes and stuff like this, and it could be used for destruction and carpet bombing and whatever. And this weapon is real. Those missiles can work, so they can use it, and they can probably use it because, so it's not very hard to understand that they probably can use it. But the effects of this weapon and the all these disease that come with these effects are probably exaggerated, because I've seen a documentary not that long ago that was making by American journalists about this Semipalatinsk area and all this, place. And there's also um, a space starting. How do you call it? Place where from space ships go. We call it Cosmodrome. How do you
Oh
call it?
yeah, spaceport or yeah,
Spaceport, whatever, Cosmodrome.
Cosmodrome is best. I
Yeah,
like it better. Better word.
Baikonur, we call it's also in Kazakhstan near the Semipalatinsk area. So people that are living in this area, like having more percentage of cancer and all this,
Yeah.
very very less length of life and stuff like this. So and their kids like born with different anomalies in
Hmm.
health. And but what they were actually showing is the places where the testing of missiles go and where we have those missiles part collapse. Like when you start a missile, some parts of it just fall down, like the engine and all this stuff, and it has this fuel inside which is very toxic and could easily do the same effects as a nuclear waste or whatever they call it. So it's like,
Yeah, but maybe they're just trying to screw up Kazakhstan. But you know how much it costs to keep Kazakhstan? They have to rent that. The Russian government's paying like hundreds of millions of dollars at least a year just to rent that spaceport. That's why they're building the new spaceport. Or I guess you guys built the new spaceport on the east coast of Russia.
they're
So I
just
mean,
stealing the money, just stealing the money there, just and it's not very expensive. It's like $15 million a year renting all this Baikonur Cosmodrome.
I
So
think there's a lot of people in Russia that would like to see a bigger Russia. I don't know that I'm not trying to say everybody is that way, but like it's kind of the Odessa thing. Like there's a lot of Russians already in Kazakhstan, and it would make sense to them. And I'm not saying that as that I'm one way or the other in that circumstance because I have lots of friends in Kazakhstan. They come over here a lot. Actually, it's interesting, but the thing about Kazakhstan is like it has been the home of a lot of for 1,000 years it's been war, and then in the last 100 years it's been the craziest alien city until Astana, and everything that's happened there, even the fall of the Soviet space program when the rocket smashed and just killed all of the cosmonauts and scientists. It was tragic, and no one was allowed to talk about it for decades. But it's a huge reason why things kind of slowed down. There was a huge regression in space, research
yeah,
right after that.
I think they just needed to change the manager, and new manager came, and now they're stealing a lot more and more efficient than they used to do in the Soviet times. Because capitalistic system, increases the corruption, not decreases it actually. So those budgets are very huge, and amounts of money they spent on the space stuff is, very very big. Like the best brain doctor in Russia gave an interview for 30 minutes, and he was talking also about the era of stupid people, and they were also touching the space programs, like why don't they have any efficiency in those space programs at all? No scientific, you know, um, breakthroughs, nothing like this. And he was saying, like, I was participating for 20 years in all this crap, and they were sending me samples from the space and all this stuff. And, just a simple explanation was they were making this just to make money. So it's like, uh,
Yeah, I mean, they
in
made me do research, and I was always annoyed that they'd say it was exactly this. You do rock research and stoichiometric research, and they would just tell you, yeah, it looks like stuff from Earth. You
Yeah,
know,
no, 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 no. He was talking about biological experiments because a lot of stuff you can do in space. Just bring some animals there, just test them, make those measurements, and figure out what is actually will be going on when you send a person to space. Like they're
right?
trying to send person to Mars right now, but nobody was being farther than the magnetic field of Earth,
Mm-hmm.
like the official version. Like how you supposed to send somebody, like maybe some reptiles or somebody, but they send the same old rats, the same old monkeys, and just spend all these animals
But
for
Leica was different.
nonsense.
Leica was special. She was a good dog.
But
I
they
don't
did
know.
it all in 60s. Why are they just trying to do the same stuff that was done in
Well,
60s
they
with
do.
no
Okay, so technically they do things like they say they do things. I mean, I don't want to say that I believe everything I hear, but like they say that they're bringing things to space.
Right
I've
now
heard
they are
about.
not doing nothing. Right now they just do nothing. He was talking about 20 years, like 20
Yeah,
years of research when he was engaged in all these biological experiments from space. And they were sending him samples, the brains, the cells, the cuts. He's researching, he's the best doctor in brains in Russia and probably in Europe. He
mm,
knows everything about the brain, how it's composed, all this, connections in the brains, what do they affect and stuff like this. And he was tested all the stuff they were making in space and given his resolutions on their experiments. And he was like very surprised that they spending money on the same stuff that they were doing in 60s. And he's
yeah.
like, what the hell is going on?
Well, I mean, they admit that they destroyed all of the stuff, whether or not it did what it did or not, they couldn't do it now. And so now what they're doing is they're trying to automate all these things properly, which is interesting. So, like the SpaceX launch yesterday, it proves that it's not that they're trying to do anything novel. It's that they're trying to do something more efficiently so they can do it again. But there's plenty of people putting, like, Discovery was a program by NASA and, Tesla and whatever, putting money and things into space, and they just put little satellite cubes that we would design. There's like a little robot machine that has a 3D printer, and it has chips on it, and they would try to put bacteria and things in space just to see what would happen. And now what you have is just soft disclosure about it. It's like every few days we talk. Somebody's gonna talk about this tomorrow. I guarantee it. I'll buy you a drink if I'm wrong. Like tomorrow on BBC or something, or somewhere, they're going to be talking about bacteria that's evolving in space that's attached to one of the CubeSats or something like that. That's how it
But
happens now.
problem
It's
is they're gonna send person to space, a human to space. What the hell is bacteria doing with the person?
well,
We're talking about survival of the person
they're going to
in a
start with
couple.
artists. They're going to send
Yeah, they're gonna send Trump to space or whoever. I don't know, but they have to send somebody to
a
test
Japanese guy is going to send like 10, 20 artists to space. They're going to be non-essentials, don't worry. But they're going to send some artists to space, and then that way they can focus on their art up there.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows? Well, the problem is actually that the amount of money that they spend that don't bring us any efficiency to us. And he says like the space program is non-profit, period, non-profit. But it's supposed to create
Well,
some step by
there's
step
there's some
increasing
there
of
is some stuff.
technology, but it
Okay,
doesn't.
let's devil's advocate that point, right? So first off, like the KGB, CIA, NASA thing, right? Let's kind of conglomerate them into a thing, and then let's also think of it like that. Like the idea of people fighting for these things has led to what? Well, microwaves, I guess. It's not super exciting, but it's nice. Cell phones. That's it. Velcro. Like pretty sweet. Like if you wouldn't have like in general, there's like 3 or 4 things I don't hate that come from like this idea. Also LSD, right? Probably comes from this idea of like connecting people to outer space. And even looking in, beyond that, there's like people that are trying, to fight each other and make each other more efficient. The CIA watching Russians in their not connected to each other mode has made free agency so that people can do away with like the government the same way they used to. So I don't know. There are some things I find kind of interesting about this whole space race that's been invading Earth, but I mean, I wouldn't say that they haven't done anything for us.
Well, I just said before, everything new is just good old forgotten old stuff. So they didn't invent anything. Like rockets were, launched since the beginning of 20th century, and they still launching the same types of rockets with the same types of probable technology and all the same stuff. So we haven't seen any actual space
Right.
footage yet. So the rockets is just launching and it's go to the
Cut.
trajectory and just
Yeah. Cut.
the same is landing. The same is landing of SpaceX. Every time they cut it, exactly on the landing, and like, ooh, just everybody's applauding. I've seen a bunch of those videos of
I just
live
feel
broadcast.
bad for anybody who defends him these days. It's like, oh man, it's like defending an abusive husband. You know, you're like, this video is beating you. It's not winning. You know, it's bad. I wanted
Yeah.
to ask you though, like segueing from space stuff a bit, because like who believes in that? Let's talk about fiction, things that were probably true. Like last time we left on the Taurus Bulba thing, and you were like Taurus Bulba. So I was wondering, like, what do you think about that story? You know, about the Nikolai story.
Uh, you know, it was in school when we researched, not researched, when we had it in program. But you know, I was pretty lazy back then and didn't read it because I didn't like this novel actually because it was boring for me. So you know, you just start to read it and you know
Yeah.
that's some bullshit. So you
And
just
that's how you know. That's what they do to you. They force you to hate something. You know what I mean?
yeah. But I'm really sorry not to do it right now. So maybe if I have time, I'll check it out. But again,
Never force yourself to do something at a time that you're not supposed to. I mean,
no, no, no,
it's
no,
you
no.
know,
It's always a time to do something
yeah.
when it's a time. So if we have this time, if I have this chance to do it, I'll actually do it.
Well, I've been finding it to be like more and more like I mean, it's first off Nikolai Gogol, right? He is that how you'd say his name? He wrote this whole book about a guy named Taurus, you know, Taurus, like Tartarus kind of thing. And Taurus is like because the Tatars are the Cossacks, and it goes back and forth that they're it basically starts out that the dude gets his son involved in this. Okay, Poland is got a war with the Turks, and in the middle of this is the Cossacks in the Ukraine and Kiev, and the Tatars' only situation is they don't want to be invaded by the Arabs coming from the Turks or the Ottomans, so they help the Poles, but because they do, they're exhausted at the end, and the Poles take them and they shut them down, and then they take their culture, they take their city, they take their history. So all of these long-haired Cossacks they cut their ponytails, and then they go out and they live in fields, and they completely abandon their city, and they're all nomads. And then he takes his two sons and he sends them to Polish schools, you know, so they can be raised as you know, by the best schools in Poland, but as immigrants that are rejected and disrespected, derogated, and beaten, hazed, you know, the worst kind of stuff that was going on in old prison culture style Russia at that time. And then afterwards, he thinks his kids are going to know how, from the inside out, to defeat the Poles, and then they can get it back. And then that's his vow. And if he doesn't do that, he'll like cut his own balls off. You know what I mean? He's just like he's balls against the wall about this. So eventually, his son becomes so Polish that he defends the Poles for a girl against the father. And the father's like, dude, what have you done? What have I done? I created you, and now I have to destroy you, you know, because, you know, what matters to me are the Cossacks, right? And it's a pretty interesting story because it has so much history in it, and it's supposed to be a fiction, right? It's from 1835. It's by, I feel like Gogol was part black. He's part of the number of Moorish Russian authors. There's a number, right? Like
No, he was just a ordinary European looking guy.
well, so I keep seeing like Pushkin, right? Like Pushkin was black, right?
Pushkin was not very black, but he had relatives who were black.
Well, I mean, he wrote books like the Moorish so Russian, and you know, the Moorish Slav and stuff like that. I mean, I've seen a lot of photos of him that look a lot blacker, and then you see paintings of him that have been more white. There's a
It's
lot of that going on at that time where they're hiding their blackness, their Africanness.
well, everybody knew who he was, and his relative, who was a Moorish guy, he was very respected. He was like a right hand of Peter the First. So it's like probably it's not something to be ashamed of. And
No, yeah, I mean, it seems like a lot of people in America, like Creolic people, we're starting to find out in the 1800s, for instance, governors of Louisiana were, you know, in the 1920s and 30s were black, or at least were Creolic, so they look kind of like Pushkin. It seems like maybe most of the founding fathers, probably even Benjamin Franklin might have been, you know?
Yeah, I understand what you're talking about. It's the this expansion of Christianity and from the south of Greece and Byzantia, as they call it. Is that what actually brought all those people from the south, from the Africa into the Europe? Because it was a weak point, and so they Ottoman Turkey was very efficient. Also went through whole Europe to probably Serbia, right? So it was like attacking Vienna, uh, and so on, and it actually captured half of Spain. So it's like, who knows? But I also find a bunch of evidence that a bunch of white people were living in the places where we actually think that only black people live, and so on and so forth. So, as what my opinion was before, I stick to it. I think that people were living everywhere, and so as Chinese could be living everywhere and stuff like this. So it was multicultural country, something like what we have right now in Russia, because we have like 150 years of living side by side with Muslims and don't even fight with them actually a lot. Sometimes we have like a town or city when half of this is Muslim and half of this Christian, and they have no conflicts for all those years. But when we have somebody from the outside, we also have we had this Chechen war, and it was probably a false. It was probably a staged event, as what I think right now. But a bunch of people were sacrificed. This is what they actually do? They sacrifice the best, because only the best people die in the wars. The cowards are just hanging around the couches in their houses, hiding in the basements of their houses, and that's what they do. And only honest men with the honor go to the wars and die. That's what I like about America. It's what I like about Japan. That's what I like about China, and that's what I like about Turkey. That all those countries still keep this military tradition, although it's like 200 years, but we're still hanging on. Look at the Europe; they already gave up. Like they are not, protecting their culture anymore. So that's my point.
It seems like that's the crazy. Do you think they're going to provoke them to, though? Is that going to be part of it? Like everyone, is there going to be a provoking point where Europe rises up in reaction?
Yeah, I think it's actually provoking people to, to show themselves, because they need all those honored people to die. They want them to sacrifice. That's what they do. That's why all those firemen, you know, probably were sacrificed a bunch of times in some events when, you want to send the people to who you send first. The 911 people, firemen, or who else? Maybe National Guards, special forces, whatever the event is. And most of the people die there just, just for for some orders that nobody even knows what the purpose was.
Right. Well, it seems like we're finding like each time though, like that's why it's nice to study the history. We're finding all of these cures to those things. Like someone mentioned earlier in the chat, like they're like miso soup is the cure, and I think we talked already about how that cured nuclear. It eats the heavy metals and radiations, and it'll take out the heavy metals and toxins, and it'll break down the proteins into amino acids, which then can be digested. So like that's a crazy thing that exists. It seems like there's a lot of little things that are like very well engineered that exist around all of these disasters that have happened. So there's something that seems like there's something that is synthesized about it. That's not completely natural, and also that it's designed to be lived through. I mean, there's ways of doing it, whether you have to go underground and wear metal chainmail or whether you have to eat miso soup. But it seems like, yeah, also looking into Bessarabia. Have you seen in Bulgaria, outside of Grasnica, there's a place called Bessarabia, and it's a completely I guess you'd say Christian civilization that was Muslim and just has all of the stuff left of the Moorish culture. And we're finding, more and more links between Europeans and Arabs from the time of right before the Inquisition or 1200 years ago.
Yeah,
There's
probably
definitely,
a large scale of coexistence, and so we have to understand that we were coexisting for several centuries. Everybody was living happy until the parasites came and probably erased all our, common sense. That's why we call it common sense, because we had it. This common sense was actually connecting the different nations, different cultures. That's what we losing right now. Country by country, they taking out the common sense. You know.
well, I think that I've put you on here for like a good hour. I feel like this has been pretty good. How are you doing on time?
Yeah, we can. What is your, what is the most, important question right now that you cannot answer? Just, just go through those.
Yeah, that's okay. Let's say, like, how about you try to tell me what's going on in terms of parasites. Well, this is something that we can expand a bit. I like using it as an abstract, but if we want to go deeper, we can.
Yeah. Okay. Have you seen any, weddings?
Weddings?
Yeah, weddings.
Yeah, weddings. I've been to some weddings. I've been a part
So,
of some weddings.
what is the fiance has?
The fiance has ring.
No, 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 no. What dress? The long dress that follows her, and somebody even
Hey
take
man, what's
kids.
up?
Some kids even carrying parts of her dress, not to, following her, like keeping the dress from the floor.
So it's a
Long,
giant dress.
yeah, long dresses. Like, how do you call it? That
Bridal
follows.
bridal dress with the
Right.
with the
Yeah. Remember the
somebody
kings?
answer that.
Yeah. Remember the kings. What did the kings have?
Crowns?
And also
Oh,
those dresses,
the robes that they pull. Yeah.
the dresses that were following kings, all those mantias and, whatever we call it, with those skins of animals,
Mhm.
decorated clothing, long red ones or purple ones, whatever you call it. So what they were actually hiding is their tails, because we seen a bunch of pictures when we have somebody like crawling on their knees, but actually we don't see any feet, but the dresses are like completely to the ground and to the floor, and we see those noblemen crawling like on their knees, but they don't have any knees and feet. And so that flashed me back to the Nagi. And so I started researching this stuff, and we were having chat with Modwiz about this stuff. He was like on the side of, advocating those Nagis, like it was like very nice and kind before. But I still stick to the point that on some certain point, those Nagis were parasites, and they were used as to capture us, our nobility, and our elites, and make some type of class of people that would not be associating them anymore with the humans that are living here. And probably they had giants on their way, so they're supposed to be taking giants out and say, oh, that's what they did probably, and we don't have giants anymore, and nobody can protect us from those Nagis because they're really, powerful. And so what they did is actually they hired all those traitors, all those elites, to serve them, created all those humanoids, hybrids, also like kinocephals with the heads of the dogs, and you know. So I had a bunch of pictures of those in my videos. So like, it's not like very point of out of nowhere. So it has a bunch of proof about it. So all those tales are pictured, and the people having the cutting their heads of people, like what we see on the Rammstein video, is completely their god, the Kali Ma, what they're following her. So it's like also connected to Jupiter, because the wife of a Jupiter is Notre Dame, is the mother, or Mary, which is actually representing the Kali Ma. What are the sons of Ma? The Ma sons are Masons. Ma sons. They following her and they worshiping her still. It's like a never-ending story. They sacrifice themselves to this god, and they sacrifice us to keep the power above us. So this is the pyramid of this sacrifice.
Wow, man! I'm just thinking about this one time. A friend of mine was he was like drunk in front of some Masons, and he's like, "Oh, you guys are Ma's sons of Ma," and they looked at him pretty weird. So, I think you might be onto that. Also interesting is Ma being like the Sanskrit for female, attached to Kali Ma, Kali Fa. So like Kali Fa is the caliphate wife, the goddess, and she's a giant and she's black. I mean, according to the story of how California got its name, they say it's not supposedly the Kali Yuga, but it is. But it's supposed to be about, Kali Fa, and she's this huge giant that has all these she has all these men that worship her. I think they're furry white men that worship the giant black queen, as far as I recall. But then there's all kinds of different people that live there in California, as are these lagoon-like places. And then this was something recently when I was thinking about Disneyland back in the beginning of California Adventure, because next to Disneyland they have a new park called California Adventure, which is like a park about California. It's like a bonsai version of the state. And there was a part of it where they built a temple and they tore it down in about a year and a half or two. And it was like literally 8 sides with 2 pillars at each side. On the inside, it had screens all over, and then statues of Whoopi Goldberg. And I was like, really? Whoopi Goldberg? It can't be Whoopi Goldberg. And then they projected Whoopi Goldberg's face right on the goddess, and she's all like, "Hi, I'm the goddess of California. Like, I make all your dreams come true." It was like really creepy. But yeah. They really played into it that the goddess is there. It makes the dreams come true for them. I was wondering though, what do you think about some of these other genomic sequences? So giant is one, but like what about like so hypermelanin for one thing, which is like being super black, or like pheomelanin, which is like the red and the chromatophoric spots. Like, do you think there's anything to these things that they're like?
I think just all the people were formed in different cells. That's why we have like all those differences that we observe. Like probably white people were brought here from some other cells. So it's like not on the only cell that we have right now. So probably the indigenous people were the so-called Native American people, and probably the Chinese also were here before the white people came. But I can also say and suppose that the black people were also brought here. So it's like we are the two who brought here, and we lived in the different places before. Then we mixed up in the whole country. We had a union. We had all this cooperation. It's not like we have the only cell. So we have a bunch of cells around us, and probably people came from different cells with the different physical properties of the illumination. And probably that's why they have different skin tone. Like maybe they have more ultraviolet there, or who knows, like what I'm talking about. So it's like not the only sun that we have here. So probably different places, different spaces, maybe even different levels of cells, and still people go into the only place here which has the axis of rotation. So that's why it's in the middle, in the center, and it was called Midgard in all these legends.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows that it was called Midgard. So Midgard is in the middle and is guarding the entrance to the upper world, so-called heaven world or Asgard or whatever you call it. So Probably the white people came from Asgard and black people came from somewhere else. That's why we have all this symbolism with black and white chess and like all this competition that we have in chess is symbolizing all this stuff. But in fact, here we all coexisted and lived happily for a couple of centuries before the parasites figured out that their plans are ruined. And that's why it's when they kept us, in this process of resets, so we can, forget about our friendship and start fighting again as we were before, as to where we bring all those legends about the fight between Carthage and Rome. So it's like all this story, but I think it was not that long ago. It was like 500 years before that. Before that, we were fighting with Chinese, and that's why we were talking about with this Zachleo guy probably the day before yesterday, and he was also confirming the calendar that they have in Serbia is like 7527. So, and he thinks that this date is from the beginning, the creation of the world. But what we know in Russia, it was from the creation of the Mir, and Mir is not only world; it's also peace treaty. So I think we have a peace treaty with Chinese. They built all those, reparation walls, so we cannot attack each other anymore, and that's where it came from. Probably Chinese were cooperating with the parasites also because they took all this cult of dragons and snakes and all this stuff into their beliefs. And I think they also connected to this process of enslaving this population. So because they're like very pissed off because a bunch of people came into their world and like they very pissed off of
Right.
that.
It looks like there's somebody was saying something recently. It's pretty strange, and I haven't gone too deep into it, but I still am willing to suggest like pursuing this anybody so we can learn about it more. Is this idea that the after the World War II ended in exile of the Axis into Hyperborean and Antarctica, and then we're still sort of in some sort of a war with that. But that's why the Mongolian Asian like army like is includes China and Japan, and has been but secretly through economic sanctions involving like the Trilateral Commission. But
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if like how far I go with it yet, but it's an interesting concept because it would explain a lot in terms of like a new
A new era.
a new era.
They want a new era of order. They want it back because they want this all this Tartaria blanket. They put on themselves. They
Yeah,
don't leave us any part of it. They just trying to restore this history as that they were the head of Tartarians, but they were not. It was a huge Commonwealth Union, whatever you call it, and it
right.
was on the ruins of the empire that was before that. That empire was also multinational, and so I think this last two resets totally re-edited all this information, and that's why we like look at this all this nonsense that they bring us and trying to debunk it. That's the only reason that we do it, because it's really nonsense and it doesn't fit in what we see, what we observe.
It's pretty much like also impossible. We've all worked, like Richard and Martin and you and everybody's been paving the way to make sure that this can't be in the hands of anybody. We've built the infrastructure now, I think, together. Everyone now is Tartarian, and there's no way that they could ever own it or we could ever own it, or it's always going to be everybody else's thing. And that's like the coolest, that's probably the scariest thing to them, is a culture they can't copyright into obscurity. It's like, have you read Victor Pelevin? Do you like any of that stuff, like Babylon, Generation Pepsi, Generation Pi?
No, he was like a pretty mainstream, so a best-selling book. So I don't like to buy those best-selling books, like because it's like
But he's
mainstream. So,
Russian, so it's like, for me at least, I'm okay, right? It's a good
uh,
book. You should check it out, man. His name is Babylon Tartarsky. All right, I'm telling you, dropping it on you. If you
yeah,
got a
he's
book
got
about if the character's name is Babylon Tartarsky,
Yeah, I know.
Tartarsky. I mean,
I know.
how could you not read a book about a guy named Tartarsky? Like,
No, man. I was living in a city that has Tara River and the city of Tara. So it's
yeah,
like where Tartaria came out is the goddess of Tara.
you're in
So
before. You're in before. You're good.
so I mean I know all the narratives of every of his book because
Yeah.
most of them had movies
Well, I
on
mean,
them.
it's
And so
basically the Russian Eyes Wide Shut. I don't know. The movie's probably pretty good, but the book is crazy because he's
he, he
I'd have to read subtitles anyway, so I just went with the book. But like it's pretty crazy because the whole idea of like an Illuminati kind of organization that is worshiping a goddess because the goddess has to penetrate with the staff the bearded wild man like in the Epic of Gilgamesh, and they say it has to be a dude named Babylon Tartarsky, and he's like, why me? And they're like, we have no idea, but like who else, like it's pretty good. I don't know.
Yeah, the idea of many of Russians are pretty creative as any other Slavic nation. So we are like our best skill is creativity. We're like very creative in fantasies and all these inventions and stuff like this. So even say poor people or slaves are very inventive just because they need to survive. You know, and we were discussing about the origin of Slavs, this name, and that's why because they enslaved us after the reset. They called us Slavs because we are slaves actually, and this is how they were mocking us because Slava is actually glory.
Hmm.
We were glorifying our ancestors, and they called us this word a slave word. So this is very interesting because this is really the idea and the connection between different languages of Slavic groups and the English language that we established while talking with the guys from Serbia and Sweden. We were cross-checking each and every word and like established all those connections. And I think I'm gonna be editing this 2-hour video for a couple more weeks, but I'm gonna be uploading little small parts with the points where we starting and finishing, so people can understand for like 20-minute videos. It's a
Beautiful.
lot better than to upload 2-3 hour video when people just get lost in this content. So that's what my strategy is to make shorter videos but more on the point than to make huger ones, but wasting people's time because they may be not interested in the stuff, or just the viewers retention is losing huge percentages.
That's absolutely true. I think there's a little bit of both. I'm seeing the same thing, moving towards smaller videos and 7-minute and 20-minute videos as well. But I love doing like stream of consciousness back and forth because it takes a while sometimes for us to catch up with what the other's been up to for a while so that we can start making the new things.
Yeah, of course. It was a pleasure talking to you, so I hope next time will be a lot quicker to establish. Not
Yeah.
like a
I'm pretty
yeah.
sure that like there's certain amount. I mean, the closer we get to the Bilderberg meeting, the harder it's gonna be, buddy. You're gonna have to we're gonna
Yeah.
have to set it up. But yeah, much love, dude. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Spasiba.
Yeah.